Picture this. You are Marcus Flavius, a skilled stonemason from the hills outside Rome, and today you receive the commission that will change your life forever. A messenger arrives at your workshop bearing the imperial seal. Emperor Caligula himself has requested your services for a special project within the palace walls. The pay is beyond anything you've ever imagined, enough to secure your family's future for generations. You're told the work is urgent, highly confidential, and of the utmost importance to the empire. As you gather your tools and follow the imperial guards through the marble corridors of the palace, you feel pride swelling in your chest. You are about to become part of history, helping to build something magnificent for the greatest emperor Rome has ever known. What you don't realize as you walk deeper into the palace complex is that you're being led to chambers that have been carefully hidden from public view. Rooms where the most powerful man in the world indulges appetites so twisted that even Rome's jaded aristocracy whispers about them in hushed tones. The blueprints you'll be given show innocent-looking chambers, but the modifications you'll be asked to make, the hidden passages, the reinforced walls, the drainage systems designed to wash away evidence, will gradually reveal a truth so horrifying that many workers before you have simply vanished rather than complete their tasks. Tonight, you'll begin constructing what historians would later call some of the most disturbing spaces ever created by human hands. Chambers designed not for glory or beauty, but for the systematic breaking of human spirits in service to one man's limitless depravity. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and suffering, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. To understand the horror of what Caligula created, we must first understand the man himself and how absolute power transformed a promising young prince into history's most twisted ruler. Born Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus in 12 AD, he seemed destined for greatness as the son of the beloved general Germanicus. Romans called him Caligula, meaning little boot, after the miniature soldier's boots he wore as a child while accompanying his father's legions. Those early years showed no hint of the monster he would become. But tragedy struck early when his father died under mysterious circumstances, possibly poisoned by Emperor Tiberius. Young Caligula watched his mother and brothers suffer imprisonment and exile, learning brutal lessons about the nature of imperial power. When Tiberius finally adopted him as heir, Caligula had already developed the paranoid cunning that would later serve his darkest impulses. He spent years hiding his true nature, playing the role of the grieving but loyal successor while secretly planning his revenge against a world that had destroyed his family. When Caligula ascended to the throne in 37 AD at just 24 years old, Romans celebrated wildly. Here was their golden boy, the son of their military hero, come to restore glory to the empire. The new emperor's first acts seemed to confirm their hopes. He recalled political exiles, paid generous bonuses to the military, and funded elaborate public entertainments. But those who knew him best began to notice disturbing changes in his behavior almost immediately. Ancient historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio documented Caligula's rapid descent into megalomania with clinical precision. Within months of taking power, he began demanding to be worshipped as a living god, insisting that statues of himself be placed in temples throughout the empire. He claimed direct communication with Jupiter and other deities, often holding conversations with their statues in full view of horrified courtiers. But it was his treatment of people around him that revealed the true depths of his twisted psychology. The palace complex, where Marcus would soon work, had become a maze of terror, carefully hidden behind marble facades and silk tapestries. Caligula had begun transforming sections of the imperial residence into specialized chambers, designed to satisfy appetites that grew more disturbing with each passing month. Contemporary accounts describe rooms fitted with elaborate restraining devices, chambers with slanted floors designed for easy cleaning, and soundproofed spaces where screams could not escape to disturb other palace activities. What made Caligula's cruelty particularly horrifying was its systematic nature. This wasn't random violence born of rage or passion, but carefully planned psychological and physical torture designed to break human beings down completely. The emperor had developed what modern psychologists would recognize as an elaborate methodology for destroying personality and rebuilding his victims as extensions of his own will. He particularly targeted the children of Rome's elite families, understanding that terrorizing the aristocracy's offspring was the most effective way to maintain absolute control over the empire's power structure. Marcus received his first glimpse of this hidden world when the palace administrator handed him architectural plans unlike anything he had ever seen. The blueprints showed a series of interconnected chambers deep within the palace complex, each designed for specific purposes that the administrator refused to explain in detail. The walls were to be reinforced with lead sheeting to prevent sound from escaping. Hidden passages would allow discreet movement between rooms. Most disturbing of all, elaborate drainage systems were to be installed throughout, designed to handle what the plans euphemistically called ceremonial liquids. The first chamber Marcus was instructed to modify had been a simple storage room, but the renovations would transform it into something that defied description. Rings were to be mounted in the walls at various heights, some designed for adult proportions, others clearly intended for much smaller individuals. The floor was to be rebuilt with a subtle slope leading to the new drainage system, while the ceiling was to be fitted with elaborate pulley mechanisms that served no architectural purpose Marcus could understand. As work progressed, Marcus began to notice other disturbing details. The chambers were being fitted with mirrors positioned at specific angles, creating a disorienting effect that would make occupants feel constantly observed from multiple directions. Ventilation systems were designed to allow airflow but prevent sound from escaping, while lighting fixtures were positioned to create dramatic shadows that would enhance the psychological impact of whatever activities were planned for these spaces. The most chilling aspect of the construction was how normal it all seemed on the surface. Palace officials supervised the work with the same professional demeanor they might bring to any imperial project. Materials were requisitioned through standard channels, payments were made according to normal procedures, and the craftsmen worked with the same attention to detail they brought to constructing temples or public buildings. Only the specific modifications revealed the true purpose of what they were creating. Marcus learned from other workers that this wasn't Caligula's first such project. The emperor had been gradually expanding his private chambers for months, each new addition more elaborate than the last. Older craftsmen whispered about previous assignments that had left them deeply disturbed, rooms fitted with specialized furniture that seemed designed for restraining rather than comforting occupants. Chambers with walls covered in materials that could be easily cleaned after violent activities, and spaces that seemed designed more for breaking human spirits than for any conventional purpose. The second chamber Marcus worked on revealed even more disturbing details about Caligula's systematic approach to human suffering. This space was being converted into what the blueprints labeled a preparation room, fitted with facilities for bathing and grooming that seemed innocent, until you noticed the restraining mechanisms built into every surface. Bronze fixtures were positioned to allow occupants to be secured while being cleaned, while specialized tools were stored in wall-mounted cabinets that could be locked to prevent access by unauthorized personnel. Ancient sources describe how Caligula had developed elaborate rituals around the preparation of his victims, particularly targeting the children of noble families who were brought to the palace under various pretexts. Young boys might be told they were being honored with positions as imperial pages, while girls from aristocratic families could be summoned for what were described as educational opportunities or cultural exchanges. The preparation chambers allowed these innocents to be systematically processed according to the emperor's specific requirements. Contemporary accounts by palace staff, who later testified before the Senate, reveal the horrifying efficiency of Caligula's operation. Victims would be brought to the preparation chambers where they would be bathed, groomed, and dressed according to the emperor's particular preferences for that day's activities. The process was designed to be psychologically devastating, stripping away the victim's sense of identity and autonomy before they were even brought before the emperor himself. The third chamber presented Marcus with his most disturbing assignment yet. This room was being fitted with what the plans called presentation platforms, raised areas surrounded by seating arrangements that would allow multiple observers to watch whatever occurred in the central space. The platforms themselves were fitted with mechanisms that could adjust height and angle, while the surrounding seating was arranged in tiers like a miniature amphitheater designed for the most intimate and horrifying performances. Historical records suggest that Caligula had begun forcing members of the Roman elite to attend these private exhibitions as a means of ensuring their loyalty through complicity. Senators, military commanders, and wealthy merchants would be invited to witness the emperor's treatment of victims, creating a network of shared guilt that made resistance virtually impossible. Those who expressed even the slightest objection would quickly find themselves added to the list of potential victims for future sessions. Marcus began to understand that he wasn't just building chambers for the emperor's private use, but creating a systematic apparatus for terrorizing Rome's entire ruling class. The carefully designed spaces would allow Caligula to demonstrate his absolute power over life and death, while forcing the empire's elite to participate in their own moral destruction. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare disguised as palace renovation. The most technically challenging aspect of the construction involved creating spaces that could be quickly reconfigured for different types of activities. Walls were fitted with hidden panels that could reveal or conceal various devices depending on the emperor's mood. Floors were designed with removable sections that could expose pits or elevated platforms as needed. Even the lighting systems were built to create different atmospheric effects, from stark brightness that would eliminate any possibility of concealment to dim, shadowy illumination that would enhance the psychological impact of whatever horrors were being inflicted. As months passed and the construction neared completion, Marcus began to notice changes in the palace atmosphere that filled him with growing dread. Servants moved through the corridors with the quick, nervous energy of people living in constant fear. Guards stood at attention, with eyes that had seen too much, while palace officials conducted their business with the hollow efficiency of people who had learned not to think too deeply about their duties. The final chamber Marcus worked on was perhaps the most disturbing of all. This space was designed as what the blueprints euphemistically called a recovery area, but the specifications told a different story. The room was fitted with medical equipment that seemed designed more for prolonging suffering than providing healing. Restraining devices were built into every surface, while specialized tools were stored in cabinets that could only be opened by palace physicians who had sworn absolute secrecy about their activities. Contemporary medical accounts suggest that Caligula had recruited doctors who were willing to use their skills to keep victims alive and conscious through experiences that would normally result in death or unconsciousness. These physicians developed techniques for managing pain and trauma that allowed the emperor to extend his sessions far beyond what human endurance would normally permit. The recovery chambers allowed victims to be restored to the point where they could endure further abuse, creating cycles of suffering that could last for days or weeks. Historical records from this period reveal the systematic nature of Caligula's operation through administrative documents that survived in the imperial archives. Detailed schedules coordinated the movement of victims through the various chambers, while inventory lists tracked the supplies needed to maintain the facilities. Payment records show regular purchases of materials that had no obvious use in normal palace operations, but would be essential for cleaning and maintaining spaces where violence occurred regularly. The emperor's personal correspondence, discovered centuries later in sealed sections of the palace, reveals his own thoughts about these activities in language that chills the blood even across the centuries. Caligula wrote about his victims with the detached interest of someone conducting scientific experiments, noting their reactions to different treatments and making observations about the most effective methods for achieving various psychological effects. He seemed to view human suffering as an art form that he was perfecting through systematic practice. Perhaps most disturbing were the records Caligula kept of his victims' families, documenting their reactions to their children's disappearances and the various cover stories used to explain extended absences from home. The emperor seemed to take particular pleasure in the anguish of parents who suspected the truth, but were powerless to act against the supreme authority of the empire. Some families were even invited to palace events, where they might glimpse their transformed children serving in various capacities, creating additional layers of psychological torture for everyone involved. As Marcus completed his work on the final chamber, he realized that he had become part of something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The spaces he had created with his own hands would soon be filled with the screams of innocence, whose only crime was attracting the attention of the most powerful man in the world. The marble walls and polished floors he had crafted with such care would witness horrors that challenged the very definition of human behavior. The chambers were completed in late 39 AD, just as Caligula's behavior was reaching new heights of public excess. The emperor had begun appearing in public dressed as various gods, demanding worship from citizens who had once revered him as a legitimate ruler. His spending on private pleasures had bankrupted the imperial treasury, while his paranoid purges had eliminated many of Rome's most capable administrators and military leaders. Contemporary accounts describe the first uses of the completed chambers as representing a new low in imperial cruelty, even by the standards of an empire that had seen considerable violence throughout its history. The systematic nature of the abuse, combined with Caligula's apparent enjoyment of the psychological aspects of torture, created an atmosphere of terror that penetrated every level of Roman society. Noble families began sending their children away from the capital, while those who couldn't afford to leave lived in constant fear that their offspring might catch the emperor's attention. The efficiency of the chamber operations revealed the methodical mind behind Caligula's madness. Victims were processed through the various spaces according to carefully planned schedules that maximized the emperor's entertainment, while minimizing the risk of discovery by unauthorized personnel. The soundproofing and hidden passages allowed activities to continue even during official palace functions, while the specialized cleaning and disposal systems ensured that evidence could be eliminated quickly and completely. Ancient sources suggest that the chambers remained in use for approximately 18 months before Caligula's assassination in January of 41 AD. During that time, historians estimate that hundreds of victims passed through the facilities, with very few ever returning to their normal lives. Most simply disappeared from the historical record entirely, while others emerged so psychologically damaged that they could never function normally in Roman society again. The discovery of the chambers after Caligula's death created a crisis for the new emperor Claudius, who faced the challenge of addressing these horrors while maintaining stability in the empire. The spaces were immediately sealed, and their existence was officially denied, while surviving victims and witnesses were relocated to distant provinces where their testimonies could not destabilize the government. The craftsmen who had built the facilities, including Marcus, were quietly eliminated to prevent any detailed accounts of the construction from spreading among the population. Modern archaeological investigations of the palace complex have uncovered evidence that supports many of the historical accounts of these chambers. Hidden passages have been found that match descriptions in ancient sources, while specialized drainage systems and structural modifications suggest spaces designed for activities that went far beyond normal imperial functions. Physical evidence of lead-lined walls and soundproofing materials confirms the systematic effort to conceal whatever activities occurred in these hidden areas. The psychological impact of Caligula's chambers extended far beyond their immediate victims to affect the entire structure of Roman society. The knowledge that the emperor could summon anyone's children for his entertainment created an atmosphere of universal vulnerability that undermined the traditional relationships between rulers and subjects. Noble families who had once competed for imperial favor now lived in terror of attracting attention, while common citizens learned to keep their children hidden whenever imperial officials appeared in their neighborhoods. Perhaps most tragically, the systematic nature of the abuse meant that many victims who survived the experience were never able to recover their sense of safety or normalcy. Contemporary medical accounts describe former victims displaying symptoms that modern psychology would recognize as severe trauma responses, inability to form relationships, persistent nightmares, and profound distrust of authority figures. These individuals carried the psychological scars of their experiences for the rest of their lives, serving as living reminders of what absolute power could inflict on the innocent. The chambers also revealed the corrupting influence of unlimited authority on everyone who participated in their operation. Palace staff, who initially expressed horror at their assignments, gradually became efficient administrators of systematic cruelty, while doctors who had trained to heal learned to use their skills to prolong suffering. Even the guards and servants who merely maintained the facilities found themselves complicit in horrors that challenged their basic humanity. The economic impact of maintaining these operations provides another window into their systematic nature. Imperial records show enormous expenditures on materials and supplies that had no apparent connection to normal palace functions, but would be essential for the chamber operations. Specialized furniture, medical equipment, cleaning supplies, and disposal services required constant funding, while the need for absolute secrecy meant that many purchases had to be made through intermediaries who inflated costs significantly. When Caligula was finally assassinated by a conspiracy of Praetorian guards and senators in January 41 AD, the chambers became one of the first priorities for the new government. Emperor Claudius ordered the immediate sealing of all specialized facilities and the destruction of any records that might document their existence or operation. The official position was that these spaces had never existed, while any rumors about their use were dismissed as political propaganda against the previous administration. The systematic destruction of evidence was remarkably effective, with most contemporary accounts of the chambers coming from sources who were not directly involved in their operation. Palace staff who had participated were relocated or eliminated, while victims who survived were scattered across the empire and discouraged from discussing their experiences. The result was a historical cover-up so thorough that modern scholars have only recently begun to piece together the full extent of Caligula's systematic cruelty. For Marcus the Mason, completion of the chambers marked the beginning of a nightmare that would last the rest of his life. The man who had approached the project with pride in his craftsmanship found himself haunted by knowledge of what his skills had helped create. Historical records suggest that many craftsmen who worked on the chambers suffered psychological breakdowns after learning the true purpose of their construction, while others were driven to desperate acts to escape their complicity in such systematic evil. The legacy of Caligula's chambers extends far beyond their brief period of operation to influence our understanding of how absolute power can corrupt even the most basic human relationships. The systematic nature of the abuse, the careful planning required for the facilities, and the network of complicity needed to maintain operations all demonstrate how institutional evil can develop when there are no effective checks on authority. Modern historians studying this period have identified Caligula's chambers as representing perhaps the most systematic example of state-sponsored torture in the ancient world. While other rulers throughout history have committed terrible acts of cruelty, few have approached the methodical planning and operational efficiency that characterize these hidden facilities. The combination of architectural sophistication, medical expertise, and administrative coordination required to maintain such operations represents a unique achievement in the systematic application of human suffering. The chambers also provide insight into the psychological profile of their creator, revealing Caligula not simply as a mad tyrant, but as someone who had developed sophisticated methods for psychological manipulation and control. The careful attention to environmental factors like lighting and sound, the systematic progression of victims through different stages of abuse, and the deliberate involvement of family members and social elites all suggest a mind that understood human psychology and used that knowledge for the most evil purposes imaginable. Today, the exact location of Caligula's chambers remains hidden beneath centuries of construction and renovation in the ruins of the imperial palace complex. Archaeological investigations continue to uncover evidence of hidden passages and specialized facilities that support historical accounts of these spaces. But the full extent of what was built and how it operated may never be completely understood. The systematic destruction of evidence ordered by Claudius was too thorough, and too much time has passed for a complete reconstruction of these horrors. Yet the memory of what happened in those marble halls continues to serve as a warning about the dangers of unlimited power and the human capacity for systematic evil. The young boys and girls who disappeared into Caligula's chambers were not just victims of one man's twisted desires, but casualties of a system that allowed absolute authority without accountability. Their suffering reminds us that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance against those who would use power to satisfy their darkest impulses. The craftsmen like Marcus, who built these facilities, also deserve remembrance, not as collaborators, but as examples of how ordinary people can become complicit in extraordinary evil through gradual compromise and the pressure of survival. Their story reminds us that systematic cruelty requires not just evil leaders, but the participation or acquiescence of countless individuals who make small moral compromises that collectively enable great horrors. In the end, the secret chambers of Caligula represent one of history's darkest chapters, a systematic assault on human dignity disguised as imperial entertainment. The marble halls that once echoed with screams have long since fallen silent, but their memory lives on as a testament to both human cruelty and human resilience. For even in the darkest moments of the imperial chambers, some spark of humanity survived in the victims who endured, the witnesses who remembered, and the craftsmen who later regretted their work. We remember these stories not to celebrate the suffering they describe, but to honor those who endured it and to ensure that the lessons learned from such systematic evil are never forgotten. The chambers may be sealed and their architect long dead, but the responsibility to prevent such horrors from happening again remains with every generation that inherits the legacy of human civilization. If this glimpse into history's hidden darkness has left you wanting to uncover more buried truths, I've prepared another journey into the shadows of the past that you won't want to miss. Click on the video appearing on your screen now to discover another shocking chapter that history tried to erase. And if you found this exploration as compelling as I did, hit that subscribe button so we can continue peeling back the layers of history together. These forgotten voices deserve to be heard, and there are so many more stories waiting to be told.